Hi, I'm Ashley Venhorst, Seed and Seed Treatment Manager here with Liqui-Grow, and today with me I have Nicole Steckline with Bayer, and she is going to cover corn rootworm.
Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. We are so thankful to have you here, and we're just going to jump right into it. So we have 3 different species of corn rootworm that we are seeing on Iowa fields today. The western, which is the striped, the northern, which is green, and the southern, which is the spotted. Mm-hmm. So of these, we also have extended diapause of one of them and a variant on another one.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot going on
How
out
do
there.
we keep track of that?
Yeah. And how do we manage for everything that they've got going on, right? So in the last couple of years, and really since about 2012 or so, the biggest problem has been with the westerns, the black and yellow striped ones. And they've just increased in their popularity. As we grow a lot of corn, they're the ones that we typically have the problem in the long term, corn on corn on corn on corn. And the reason we have the problem with them is because they are the ones that have built up resistance to our traits. So we've been just using traits without insecticide, without rotation, without really proper management and stewardship of the traits. So we've got some resistance to them. And now Mother Nature is also popping in, and she's like, hey, how about a Western variant? So on top of having, the Westerns that have some resistance to our traits, we've also got this variant that will go into, the female will fly into a soybean field, right? When she chews on some of those soybean leaves, she drops her eggs there, and then she might fly back into the cornfield. So she's even getting around some of our rotation. Mm-hmm. But the most common is going to be the Western that has resistance to the traits that we're using. You also mentioned the northern issue.
Yes.
So we've got the extended diapause. So, our number one way to get away from, corn rootworm problems is rotation. It's cheapest, it's the fastest, it's the most effective. However, in our geographies that are long-term rotation, right, Mother Nature's smart. But Mother Nature has selected for the insects that get around our management techniques. Mm-hmm. So what the extended diapause northerns, the green ones, do is when they lay their eggs, when you're corn, you plant soybeans that next year, those eggs don't hatch the first year. So when you go back to corn that following year and you aren't using insecticide, you aren't using traits, that's when those eggs hatch and they start feeding on these unprotected roots.
And that's where we're going in with the VT2 Pro after the soybeans, and we're seeing it that following year after beans.
Yes.
So going into that, we can protect it with traits. What are the different trait options that we have today?
So from the Bayer standpoint, we have our Smart Stacks, which is 2 BT proteins for corn rootworm protection. And then above that, you have Smart Stacks Pro, which is taking those same 2 BT proteins and incorporating that new RNAi technology. So we have a third trait, a third mode of action that's working in a completely different way than what we've had in the past. And then this past year, we've also introduced something called VT4 Pro. And VT4 Pro kind of lives in the middle there, where it's got that RNAi and one single BT protein.
Okay. So you're saying that there is different traits that cover the corn rootworm. What about scoring, and how do we know how bad it is versus maybe it's not so bad? How do you guys look at that?
Yeah, which one do you choose? There's so many.
Yes, there is so many. And where do you place them?
Yes. I always say that, your best ROI on management strategies is your time in scouting, because how do you know which one's going to be enough unless you know what your pressures are? Right. So going out the year before, digging some roots, looking at your stalks, your silks, seeing how far your silks have been clipped, looking for the adults so you know how much you're out there. But the other really important thing is to dig the roots and then score them. So economic threshold is if you have a node injury score of a 0.5 or above. And when you get to that 0.5 or above, that's when you're going to have to either rotate to soybeans or you're going to have to start investing some money in higher management. So doing something like adding a soil applied insecticide or investing in that Smart Stacks Pro trait. When you're that, 0.25 to 0.5, that's when you say, okay, if I'm going to use a VT4 Pro or a straight Smart Stacks, it's going to need help. If you're that 0 to a 0.25, then you're like, hey, I can use a Double Pro plus insecticide to give, that trait a bit of a break. Hopefully we aren't building that resistance. Or I can start thinking about using my VT4 Pro or using my Smart Stacks and relying on that trait because my pressures aren't too high.
Mm-hmm. So with those traits and you're saying management practices, what are some management practices that we can help with the ROI of the farmer and help them try to mitigate some of this loss that we're seeing?
Yep. Number one is don't let those pressures get too high because once they're out of control, it takes a lot of time and a lot of dollars to bring those down over time. Besides for rotation, that happens the fastest, right? But if you've been using rotation, right, and your issue is those extended diapause northerns, the biggest thing you can do, like you were saying before, is to confuse the insect.
Right.
So, those insects that have extended diapause, they are used to and they count on you using rotation. So if you have a field that you're worried about extended diapause, you can still plant soybeans that following year, but the next year it goes into corn, you're going to need to be using traits or you're going to need to be using some soil applied insecticide. Or to confuse them, you go corn on corn. Now, you're still going to have to use a trait or soil applied insecticide because there will be some of those northerns that don't exhibit that extended diapause. And you're also, quietly building some of those western because as we do corn on corn, you start increasing those western populations.
So our team at Liqui-Grow has been learning a lot about the different corn rootworm traits and insects out there, and we've been doing a lot of training on that. So we heard some new things coming down the pipeline at our most recent training. Could you give the people a little bit of information on that and when it will be available?
Yeah. So right now, we've got Smart Stacks Pro, and it's still pretty new, but we aren't going to rest on our laurels. So what we've got coming down the pipeline, hopefully end of decade, is kind of Smart Stacks Pro, where we're going to, Smart Stacks Pro right now is we've got the RNAi and 2 different BT proteins, but we're really starting to see a lot of resistance build to those BT proteins. So we're going to keep the RNAi, we're going to strip out those 2 and introduce 2 brand new BT proteins that those insects have never seen.
Well, we're really looking forward to seeing that new trait come out at the end of the decade. And thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
It was absolutely my pleasure.
Awesome. So if you have any questions, please reach out to your local Liqui-Grow team. They are more than happy to answer any questions that you have. Have a nice day.
Lead Academy.
Liqui-Grow
Excellence
and agronomy
development.